My mother, Lydia, was a botanist. At least, that's what the paperwork said. To me, she was more like a ghost. She left when I was 7, not with a dramatic fight, but like a whisper. One day she was there, smelling of damp earth and rain. The next, she was gone. My father, a quiet, broken man, only ever said she'd gone away for her research. He raised me on a diet of science textbooks and unspoken sadness. He passed away 2 years ago, and the ghost of my mother remained just that, a phantom from a life I barely remembered. I, Leo, became what my father wanted, a man of data. I was a junior researcher at a soulless biotech firm, my days spent staring at genetic sequences on a computer screen. My world was sterile, predictable, and entirely devoid of mystery, until the lawyer's letter arrived. Lydia was dead. She had passed away at her research facility in a remote, forgotten corner of the Pacific Northwest. She had left the entire property to me. My first instinct was to sell it, sight unseen, to finally exorcise the ghost. But something, a flicker of the 7-year-old boy who missed his mom, made me get on a plane. The property wasn't a research facility. It was a single, massive greenhouse, a cathedral of glass and steel, swallowed by a dense, ancient forest. It hummed with a low electric thrum, utterly silent otherwise. The air inside was warm, sweet, and heavy. And the plants. They were nothing I had ever seen. They didn't look like they belonged on this planet. There were vines that pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent light, flowers with petals like spun glass, and trees whose bark shimmered with iridescent patterns. The place was entirely automated. Irrigation, light, temperature. All controlled by a complex system of computers in a small office. In that office, I found her journals, dozens of them. But they were written in a code I couldn't understand, a mix of botanical Latin, chemical formulas, and strange star-like symbols. My mother hadn't just been a botanist. She had been a cryptographer of nature. For a week, I lived there, trying to make sense of it all. The place was a beautiful, unsolvable puzzle. I was ready to call a realtor, to give up when it happened. I was standing in front of a particularly strange plant, a single bell-shaped flower, a deep, velvety blue that hung from a thorny vine. I was tired and frustrated, and a powerful memory surfaced completely unbidden. I was 6 years old. I had a fever, and my mother was humming a lullaby to me, her hand cool on my forehead. It was one of the last, vivid memories I had of her. As the memory played in my mind, the blue flower began to react. It trembled. A soft, golden pollen, like dust motes in a sunbeam, drifted from its bell. I instinctively raised my hand to wave it away, but when the pollen touched my skin, the world dissolved. I wasn't in the greenhouse anymore. I was in my childhood bed. I could feel the rough texture of the quilt, smell the Vicks VapoRub my mother had put on my chest, and I could hear her, not as a memory, but as if she were right there. I could hear her humming, the sound vibrating through the mattress. It was real. It lasted for only 10 seconds, and then I was back in the greenhouse, gasping, my heart hammering. The blue flower was now closed, its color faded to a pale gray. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. It wasn't a hallucination. It was an echo. That's when I finally understood a fragment of her notes, a phrase I'd seen repeated over and over. Memory is not an abstraction. It is a biological signature. It can be cultivated. My mother hadn't been growing plants. She had been growing memories. I spent the next month in a state of feverish discovery. I learned that each plant was tied to a specific emotional frequency. Joy, sorrow, fear, love. To activate them, you had to provide an emotional seed, a strong, genuine memory of your own. The plant would then bloom, releasing an echo of a memory it already held. The greenhouse wasn't a collection of flora. It was a living library of my mother's entire life. I experienced her first kiss, the bitter taste of her coffee as she studied for her PhD, the overwhelming joy she felt when she first held me. I was getting to know the mother I had lost, one 10-second echo at a time. But I still didn't know why she left. That section of the greenhouse, an area filled with dark, thorny-looking plants, remained dormant. I couldn't access them. My own memories of that time were a black hole of childhood trauma. I had no seed to offer. My quiet, strange new life was shattered by a knock on the door. He was a man in an expensive suit that looked out of place in the middle of the woods. He was flanked by two others, who did not look like lawyers. "Leo Miller?" the man asked, a smile that didn't reach his eyes on his face. "My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I'm with Eterna Labs. I was a colleague of your mother's, a long time ago." I knew the name. Eterna Labs was a pharmaceutical giant, notorious for its aggressive acquisition of smaller biotech firms. "Your mother's work was revolutionary," Thorne continued, his eyes scanning the greenhouse behind me. "She was on the verge of the most important discovery in human history, the ability to archive and replay consciousness, a cure for forgetting, for death even. But she was sentimental. She wanted to keep it for herself. Eterna Labs believes that such a gift belongs to the world, for a price, of course." "This is private property," I said, my voice shaking. "We see it as a misplaced corporate asset," Thorne said, his smile vanishing. "Lydia stole the foundational research from us when she left. We have been looking for her for 20 years. We want it back, Mr. Miller, all of it." I refused. They left, but it was a warning, not a retreat. That night, I met Elias. He was a grizzled old man who ran the only supply store in the nearby town. He appeared at my door with a shotgun and a sad look in his eyes. "Knew they'd find this place eventually," he grumbled. "Your mother, Lydia. I was her friend. Her only friend out here. I promised I'd keep an eye on things." Elias told me the rest of the story. Lydia hadn't stolen the research. She and Thorne were partners. But Thorne wanted to turn their discovery into a weapon, a way to extract memories from prisoners, to create addictive, nostalgic experiences for the rich. Lydia saw the horror in that. She sabotaged their lab, took the single-source specimen, the heartwood tree, the Adam and Eve of the entire garden, and vanished. She spent the last 20 years here, not just hiding, but trying to perfect the healing aspect of her work. She wasn't trying to replay memories, Elias explained. She was trying to repair them. She believed that diseases like Alzheimer's were a form of biological corruption of memory. She was searching for a way to use healthy memory echoes to rebuild a broken mind. And then he told me the reason she left me. The research was dangerous. In its early stages, proximity to the blooming plants could affect a developing mind. She had seen minor, unsettling changes in my behavior, my sleep patterns. Fearing she might damage me, she made an impossible choice. She left to protect me. My entire life I had thought I was abandoned, but I was quarantined. Thorne and his men came back a week later. They didn't knock. They cut the power, disabling the automated systems. The hum of the greenhouse died, replaced by an oppressive silence. The delicate ecosystem my mother had built began to die. I was trapped. But I wasn't helpless. I was in a library of my mother's memories, and for the past month I had been studying. They cornered me in the central chamber, where the heartwood tree grew, its bark glowing faintly. Thorne held a device, a portable scanner. "We don't need to hurt you, Leo," he said. "We just need a cutting from the source. We'll replicate it in our labs. You can keep this sentimental museum." I knew he was lying. They would sterilize the entire place. I looked at the dormant, thorny plants around the chamber, the memories of her leaving. I knew what I had to do. I had to offer a seed. I had to force myself to remember. I closed my eyes and dug deep, past the walls I had built for 25 years. I remembered the silence in the house after she was gone, my father's silent weeping at the kitchen table, the cold, empty space in my life where she used to be, the raw, primal agony of a 7-year-old boy who thought his mother didn't love him. A single, hot tear rolled down my cheek and fell onto the soil, and the thorny plants exploded into life. But they didn't release an echo of her sadness. They released her fury. The entire chamber was flooded with her rage at Thorne's betrayal, her terror at what he planned to do, her steely determination to protect her discovery and her son. It wasn't a memory. It was a psychic assault. Thorne and his men screamed, clutching their heads, thrown into a mental storm they couldn't comprehend. They weren't just seeing her memory, they were feeling it. All of her pain, all of her resolve. In that moment of chaos, I did the one thing they never expected. I grabbed a canister of liquid nitrogen from my mother's lab supplies. I didn't destroy the heartwood tree. I walked over to Thorne, who was on his knees, and froze the scanning device in his hands, shattering it into 1,000 useless pieces. His weapon was gone, defeated not by force, but by a memory. They retreated. The next morning, with Elias's help, I got the power back on. The garden began to heal. I knew Eterna Labs would be back, eventually. But now, I was ready. I wasn't just a researcher anymore. I was a guardian. Weeks later, I finally found the memory I was looking for. It was in a single pale white flower growing close to the heartwood tree. It required the most difficult seed of all: acceptance, forgiveness. I touched its petals, thinking not of my loss, but of her sacrifice. The pollen bloomed, and I was in her office on the day she left. She was looking at a photograph of me, the one from my 7th birthday. She was crying, but she was also smiling. She whispered something to the photograph, an echo I had waited my whole life to hear. "It's okay," she whispered. "This is how I keep you safe. Be good, my Leo. I'll see you again. I promise." And she placed the photo into a box with her most precious research notes. Then she turned and walked out the door, to a life of exile, to protect me. I stood there, in the silent, humming greenhouse, the ghost of my mother finally at peace. She wasn't gone. She was all around me, in every leaf, every petal, every echo. She had left me a key, not just to her work, but to my own past. My job now was not to sell her legacy, or even just to protect it. It was to finish what she started, to learn the language of memories, not just to hear them, but to heal with them. My name is Leo. I am my mother's son, and this is my garden.